Well, welcome in, Asta. Thank you so much for being here with me. Before we get started, could you just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you so much for inviting me. So, hi everyone. My name is Aastha Sahni. I currently work as a technical trainer at Exabeam, which is a SIEM and cybersecurity product-based company. I also run a nonprofit known as BBWIC Foundation, which is focused on promoting more women in the area of cybersecurity and helping women move up in the leadership, up in the ladder in the leadership in cybersecurity.
I saw that, and I'm actually kind of curious, what got you interested in really starting your own organization for BBWIC?
Yeah, so the idea came from the fact that I have been part of several communities in the last 6, 7 years. So I started my cyber journey around in 2015, and at that point, I used to be a student. I was pursuing my master's degree in information security management, and during that time, I got to know about OWASP, and I was in New Delhi, India, at that point, and there used to be some monthly meetups, and I got intrigued. I was like, okay, what is this, and what are these monthly meetups? So I started attending them and I started becoming part of communities. And eventually I became part of many women-led communities as well on the run. But as I moved forward in my cybersecurity journey, one of the things which I found myself lost was, what am I like, if I'm part of a community, how I can contribute and at the same time how I can benefit by being already a woman in cybersecurity. So I used to see a lot of opportunities around getting women in cybersecurity. What are some intro lessons? What are some intro lessons around different domains, different areas? But for me, I had already learned that. I wanted to proceed further. I wanted to know, for example, if I'm more passionate about a particular area, I wanted to upskill myself. And at the same time, I used to see leaders on LinkedIn or at other places, at conferences. And certainly when you start in cybersecurity, you directly don't become a CISO. It takes time. So what comes in between was my question. I used to actually attend two extreme kind of sessions. One was like how to get into cyber, and the other was like how to become that CISO. And I was like, what's in between? How to move up in the ladder and how to learn new things. So eventually, when I started exploring what am I missing being part of a community person and how I can add it to the existing cyber communities, I had more fellow colleagues and friends in the industry. And I also get to know from them, they were in the same boat. So when I started sharing my concerns, I got to hear back from them the same concerns. And I was like, I need to do something about it. I need to start a small group maybe where we can start talking about what are you doing being part of the industry already? How are you planning to proceed? Because cybersecurity and IT in itself is very broad. It's not very narrow. So for example, if somebody starts in AppSec, they're not restricted to AppSec. I might want to move to cloud. I might want to move to identity and access management. So the roads and paths are very diverse, but how to move in that direction, how to become successful. So suddenly one day, if I want to move from one part of my job to another, how can I do that? Because I didn't know. For example, if you apply for jobs, you might not get shortlisted because your experience is in different area. So I started discussing these things. I started discussing leadership stuff, like how to at least move from an entry level position to a senior level position and take your first lead position, because these are the ladders which you take. So when all of these questions cropped up, I started a lean in circle, which is breaking barriers women in cybersecurity. And eventually in 6, 7, 8 months, it became huge. I never expected more women to join me, but they did. And it was surprise because, to be honest, in the beginning, I was like, okay, let's be 20 of us. Even if 20 people join me, great, we'll make a good circle. But it eventually ended up more than 200, and then the numbers are still increasing. So I ended up registering it as a nonprofit, and I started finding struggles around women, like being a woman in States, being a woman coming from a different country. Like I'm coming from India. I've spent half of my life, like literally most of my 20s in India, and then I came here. So during that time, what were the struggles? And I understand the struggles when you're coming from a developing country, how to pursue a career in a developed country, and then what are the struggles here. So to be honest, I was like, okay, I have my struggles, but I got to know struggles are here as well. So I started bringing them together, and then created this foundation. So that's a little bit history in
Yeah, no,
between.
how cool, how interesting. And if you don't mind me poking a little bit, if you could talk a little bit about just your transition coming from India over to the States, because I think that's pretty unique, you know. Just I know that can be quite a large jump, just getting up and leaving elsewhere, and then trying to do that while you're in your career, while you're trying to do school. So could you walk us through a little bit of just where your mindset was at, what obstacles you were facing, and just a bit about either words of encouragement or what you did to push through?
Yeah, of course. So I started my cybersec journey in India only. So I graduated. So I actually completed my bachelor's degree in 2013. And after that, I was offered a couple of IT positions where I felt, to be honest, very stuck because
Really?
I wanted to do something which is impactful. That's what my
Mm,
personality is. Even if I'm impacting a small set of individuals or small audience or a small population, that's fine. But I always wanted to use my knowledge in a way that I should be impactful. And at that
mm,
point, I was being offered testing positions like IT testing positions. And I was not
okay.
convinced with that because when I used to open internet at that point in 2013, I was like, the world is racing. People are already in testing, people are already in development. They are already there. So for example, if I start my journey 5 years down the lane, they would be somewhere else and I'm still stuck. So
Hmm.
I wanted to start with a position or a particular specialization which can create a larger impact. That's how I function personally. So at that point, I wanted to pursue a master's degree. I had not planned cybersecurity at that point. I gave a couple of exams in India. So we have entrance exams that you give, and there are lakhs of students like in numbers who are giving these exams. So I
Mm,
cleared one of like 2 to 3 of the entrances, and then I pursued towards the university admissions program. And there in the university where I pursued my master's degree, it was Indira Gandhi Delhi Technical University for Women in New Delhi.
mhm,
And there I discovered that, okay, I'm planning to pursue a degree in computer science and as a master's degree, but
mhm,
there is something known as information security management. And when I went into the detail of the course, the course outline has forensics, it has cryptography in
mm,
detail, it has ethical hacking in detail. And I love doing that. So I remember at that point, I could recall that when I had cryptography in one of my semesters in my bachelor's, I loved it. I was so passionate about it that after that semester, when the course was completed, I wanted something like that in the upcoming semester, but it wasn't
okay.
there. So that curiosity in me, I'm also like a very curious person, like digging down things, understanding things. So I'm kind of a person who love mysteries, and forensics
Mhm.
and ethical
Yeah.
hacking was like that. So I immediately switched at the time of admission, and I was like, I am going to take admission in this particular course. And when
Okay.
I came back home, my parents and friends at that point, like people might have heard about cyber roles in the company, but not as a domain, not as an education degree. Like
Yeah.
there were very few colleges at that point who were offering that degree. And my
Mm,
family and friends were like, what did you do? You made a wrong decision. And in all of my 2 years, to be honest, I still remember every day because I enjoyed every day. There was so many practical
wow.
things to do in terms of hacking and forensics that I loved. Like 2 years just passed by. I did a couple of certifications as well. But in those 2 years, my father was always like, will you get a job after this course? Like, I really suspect,
Mm,
like, I don't know what you're doing. But the hardest part was to get the first job. So when I started applying in the job market, there were very less positions like where the organizations, like the employers, they were not taking freshers, like somebody
mm,
who is new to cyber. The getting that very first cybersecurity position was very hard. So we were a batch of 30 students at that point, and all women. And out of 30, I guess like literally 5 or 6 of us, we got the first job, and rest of
mm,
them had to either settle for any IT roles, like not cyber specific roles. So they took
okay.
up like software engineering roles or any
Yeah.
kind of other roles, but not exactly cybersecurity. And there were like 5 of us who were like very adamant. We have to start with cyber only. We have spent 2 years. We have spent our time and energy in certification, and we're passionate about it. That's why we took the degree.
Yeah.
So getting the very first job it happened after nearly a lot of rejections. So at
Mm,
that point, I used to call companies. I used to like talk to my university, like bring certain companies. We are certified, and they used to be like, they're
mm,
not ready to hire you. they are not ready to hire somebody from the university for cyber specific roles. But somehow I think at that point, all like some of the students and the university, like we had a placement cell there, all of us collaborated and bring few organizations for interviews, and we got our first cyber role. And it was the first role. We were very excited, but the pay was very less. So at a different level, we had a disappointment, like we are being paid very less. And the statement we got at that point was, think yourself as a lucky person, you're getting a role in cybersecurity. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But so then eventually I started with an identity and access management consultant in Tata Consultancy Services. That's where the journey began. And I was like, okay, finally, I have a job in place and I'm working on it. And that's what it literally started. But I was, as I was in the job, I definitely knew I was very much underpaid. I was very much underpaid. It wasn't like
Was that through the university? And so you found that through the university?
Yes. I found that through the university, and like we were like 5 people who only got it. So the rest of the people, as I said, we had to settle for different roles. So we were completely underpaid. We were like very much underpaid, but we were like, okay, we have to spend some time. We have to gain some experience. And as soon as I think I completed 1.5 years or so in my first organization, then I switched to a different company. So now switching also became a challenge at that point. Like immediately when you switch after a year or so, you might get questions like, why do you want to switch so immediately? But we had a reason. We wanted to move to a more contributing role, because the role we started off was kind of a more of an analyst role. We were a little bit into consulting, but largely into analyst. So I switched to another job. And at that point, I was planning to move to States, because I wanted to pursue for a second master's. And at the same time, I found there were a lot of jobs at that point in the United States who were offering a cybersecurity role. I had gained some experience already. So I started applying for a second master's. But as soon as like I gave the exam and everything, like the TOEFL exam and everything, my marriage got fixed. So at that point, I was like, okay, now what to do? I have to get married, or I have to do for a second master's. So my husband luckily was in the US only. So we got married. I came here, and for the first 3 months of our marriage, I think it literally took me 2 months to get my first job here in the US again as a IM consultant. And after 4 to 5 months of my job, I was laid off.
Really?
Yes. So
all that work, right?
Yes. So it was like 4 to 5 months in your job. Everything was fine. And the funny thing was, I went to a company event. I received an award. When I came back after a week, I was laid off. And I was just so shocked, because you're working, you're in a regular routine, and you receive a call like, hey, this is your last day. And it was such a shock at that point to me, because in like I was coming from a country like India, where layoff is not so common. And I have never heard like layoff happening like in this manner. Like it was not so common. Like I've heard about it a lot. So when that happened, I was in a complete shock. First of all, I was like, what is this happening? And I just kept asking the HR, like, what's happening? Was I bad? What happened? And she was like, nothing. It's just the project I was working on. The company lost that contract and they had to lay off. And I was like, okay, now the struggle begins again. So at that point, when the layoff happened for a week or so, I was very, very shocked. But I was part of a couple of communities here when I moved to the US. So communities have been a very consistent part of my journey. And at that point, I was part of OWASP and other communities. I had friends here before even I moved to the US, because we used to be part of these global communities. So I had friends here, and 2 of my friends here in New York, they started helping me. So I started going to events in the city which were taking place. So there was this one event from ISC Square where I went, and there were a couple of other events. We had some meet and greets, and I was like, okay, I just can't sit at home and only apply for jobs. I might have to go out and meet people. And it was late 2019 and early 2020, just before the COVID. And I started visiting places. I started meeting people. I started sharing my expectation. And at that point, one of my friends suggested, like, why don't you start a channel of your own and start teaching what you do? Because teaching was something I have been doing as a volunteer and in the communities as well. I love teaching. I love sharing knowledge. And I was I was like, yeah, I'm free. I can do that till the time I'm finding a job. So I started with my channel, Cyber Preserve. I started creating a curriculum for mentoring people in cybersecurity. And as soon as I was doing this, I started to love teaching. And then I realized, like, okay, that this is something way back in school I used to love to do. I love to teach maths at that point. Certainly it was not maths this time, but I love teaching, and I started applying for teaching roles. And initially it was difficult, but my community experience as a volunteer who used to teach different areas in cyber, and my master's degree and a couple of certifications, which include certified ethical hacker that I did at that point, it really helped me to get through the interviews, at least the first round. So academies, there are a couple of 2 to 3 academies here in New York where I give my interviews. They actually considered me. And interestingly, at that point, Flatiron School, which was my last job, I went there as a volunteer to teach students of their software engineering boot camp a lesson on cybersecurity. They liked it, it went well, and immediately after a week, they had a job. And I applied for it. I gave the HR reference, like, you know what, I have been to the office before. I came last week for this session. And she was like, oh, yeah. And then the process started. I gave a couple of interviews. I gave a test teach exam. I already had knowledge on different areas through my master's program, because I was actually taught all the 8 domains in 2 years. I literally completed 13 courses. So that helped. And through that, I got my first teaching job as a lead instructor. And it had to start with network and application at that point. COVID happened. The company had to restaff things. And one day I got a call before my joining that, you know what, we had to restaff things. And you are now going to teach SIEM and threat hunting. And I was like, what? And they were like, yes. And I had got job after such a long hardship, and COVID has also hit. So I had to do this job. I cannot leave this job. And they told me, like, you know what, you have like this 6 weeks time and you have your first class in 6 weeks. And I was like, SIM, which was security, information and event management and threat hunting. I've never taught before. I have read about it, but it was like a altogether new world which came in front of me. And I had to take that challenge, because when COVID hit, a lot of businesses were impacted. People were already losing jobs. So I took that challenge. I literally remember in the first 6 weeks, I was the only member in my team. I started off their boot camp for cybersecurity. And I was like, okay, there's no one. I have to do it on my own. So the first week was, again, full in shock. I was like, this is the curriculum. I have to teach a tool. I have to teach threat hunting, and I have students coming. So I have to be accurate. I have to be precise in what I'm teaching. And those 6 weeks, I was like working, I remember 16 hours. I was working the day because students had already joined. They were in some of their self-paced courses. And my course, which was a teaching course, was coming in 6 weeks. So I was meeting students, handling their doubts. And at the same time, like after my job, like after my regular working hours, I used to start studying, because I got this pressure on me that I'm the teacher. If I teach wrong, they're learning wrong. I cannot do that. And it was like a very great pressure I was getting in. And I ended up teaching my first cohort. And after the first cohort, I started getting that grip of SIM and threat hunting. And I eventually start loving threat hunting. So this was actually a shift which happened for me from identity and access management to SIM and threat hunting. And eventually I ended up loving it. And I eventually ended up taking my first certification in Splunk last year. Because after I completed 1.5 years in teaching, I was like, now I very well know the tool. I must take a certification. So I didn't have to literally get into the preparation stuff. I had been teaching it for a while. I took my exam and I cleared it. And I was like, wow, this now seems very surreal, because literally 1.5 years ago, last year, I was like, when I started this job, I was very new. I picked it up. I learned on my own. I taught during that time. I don't know. I lost count of the cohorts I had taught. And then clearing this certification, it gave me the next level of confidence, which I hadn't when I started in 2020. And I was like, now I have come a long way. Now I know if I want to start something new, I have this experience with me when I was alone. And literally rest of my team was built after I had joined So it was like literally for 3-4 months, I was alone. And after that, the rest of the team members joined. I used to meet them. So eventually my team ended up from one person, which was me, to literally 8 people in the team. And
Wow.
doing that at that point, I just couldn't realize after 1.5 years and 2 years after when I left my job, which has made me learn a lot. Not only learned a lot in terms of like how to switch, how to transition. I actually transitioned from a consultant to an instructor. I transitioned from an identity and access management consultant to a SIEM and threat hunting instructor. And that paved way for my current job where I'm working, because Exabeam is an organization which specializes in SIEM and is advanced threat detection. So
how cool. Yeah. I love how everything like sort of like, because you took a little from here, you know, you were able to bring that there and like it married it together. And like, that's really interesting and really cool. And so I also noticed like a trend of, you know, you're very resourceful and you're very gritty. So what resources would you say, like when you were like, okay, I have to go learn this, or I have to go learn that? Because I know a lot of people tend to come up and ask like, hey, you know, where can I go learn for this topic or that topic? I'm always curious, like what resources did you, like, all right, I need to go either, I guess resources, one, even better. What resources would you go to for if you're looking to go and network, as well as what resources would you go ahead and start thinking about and looking for in terms of learning more technical security topics?
Okay. So network in terms of like networking on LinkedIn?
Yeah, like because you were talking about like networking and you were talking about meeting communities and such, and I think that's really interesting.
Yep. So I think 2 things which I did. One of the things was I used to follow my intuition, and the second thing was like right now on internet there are too much knowledge, too much data. And I often get this question. I used to get this question from my students as well. Like, what would you suggest? Internet is full of information. And I told them the trick that I have been following for years. Anytime you're learning anything new, okay, even if it's like getting into cyber, getting into IT, or getting into any domain, go to one of the university programs and go to their course outline. Those will be the topics that people would be learning, at least in their bachelor's or in their master's or in their graduate certificates or in the boot camp. Just go through the outline. See what topics they are specifically covering. Because when you go to the, like, it's very easy. You go to the university, you explore the program, you have to like put, like, either you can download it directly or you have to give your email ID. So you'll receive it over the email. You'll receive a PDF. Go through the PDF. And if you're still not sure, go to the top 3 universities or top 3 institutes which offer these programs, compare their course outline, and from there, start getting resources. So when we talk about resources, when you go to the course outlines and syllabus, most of the time, they also provide you at the bottom of it some of the books, some of the ebooks.
Yes, and the textbooks.
Yes, some of the textbooks which are there, which you can download as ebooks. Second thing which is there is you'll get a crisp knowledge of, okay, what would be covered in the topics that I want to study. Then from there, you can start accessing some of, let's take example of cyber. In cyber, we have some open source communities which are there. Like we have OWASP, we have SANS, and you have a couple of other resources. Like what are the top conferences, okay, which happen? Start looking at their content on YouTube, because they have put certain content. Through that content, you will get more resources, because in the YouTube description, there are a lot of links. If you actually, let's say if you attended a session of someone, go and connect with them on LinkedIn, see what was their qualification, what was their skill set. That's really going to help you. Don't hesitate to reach out to people. And one of the important things which I've realized in terms of networking is anytime you're connecting with someone, just send them a personal note. Like what's like not your reason for connecting, but what made you curious to connect with someone. So many times people will connect like, hey, I saw your session and I liked it and I would like to connect and discuss further, which actually gives a personalized way of connecting with people. But many times, if you know someone who's new and you don't have much knowledge, just go through their profile, go into details about what do they do. Because when you add that personalized note on LinkedIn, add something which they have done or which you can associate with them. In that way, it's easy to connect. It's easy to get a message back from someone. And then if you're looking for mentors, like for example, if you follow 3 to 4 people, like you really know, you have been following up their posts a lot, you can reach out to them with a very gentle message like, hey, I'm new to this field. Just give a little bit about background about yourself, and then mention that I'm looking for a mentor. So would you like to recommend anyone, or would you like to become my mentor? So anything which even goes as a connection request, or it goes as a message, it should have certain types of context, because again, it's not only about information. There are too many people, and we have too many fake identities as well online. So how would someone trust you and trust your efforts? So for that, you have to build some context when you connect with someone. And let's say you're not pursuing your career in cybersecurity. Let's say you're pursuing your career in data science. So find out some of the top data science conferences, find out some of the top open source resources which are there in data science. Connect with folks on LinkedIn, as I said, go through their profile, learn their journey. If they have interviews on YouTube, find those interviews, go to university pages, look for the course outlines. And these are some of the legitimate places where you'll get some specific type of guidance, which is 100% correct. At many places, you might get confused, like what's going on, what's the verbiage. It's too confusing. But university programs, outlines, people who have done this, they won't provide you wrong information. So that's something one can do. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Again, you're very resourceful. Like you really found ways to just like go after it and get it, you know? And so you slightly mentioned certifications throughout your journey, and I'm curious your take on certifications just in general, as well as if you do recommend specific certifications for someone in their first few years in cybersecurity.
Of course, absolutely. So my very first take on certification is they do add additional skills to your resume. It shows you're dedicated. It shows it kinds of a testament that, okay, you are dedicated to this and you took up this effort to clear a certification. That's great. It adds up to the resume, but it does not guarantee that you will get a job.
Yeah.
So many times we have this notion like, okay, let me get this certification, I'll get the job. No. Certification is different, job interview is different. Just clearing a certification is not a result that you will get the job. So vice versa is not correct. And coming back to your question of when starting a career in cybersecurity, some of the common certification is CompTIA Security Plus, Certified Ethical Hacker. These are the two important certifications that somebody can prepare. ISC Square has recently released their entry-level cybersecurity certification. I also took their pilot exam and I cleared that recently. So it was a pilot exam before they actually released the official certification. So I was among one of them. So
I saw that. Congratulations. I saw it on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you. So certified in cybersecurity is the entry-level certification by IC Square. It covers a lot of areas, basically all the domains and their basic principles like security principles, security operations, networks, risks, identity access management. So it literally covers the basics of all domains. And it actually gives you a glimpse of, okay, in future, if you want to prepare for CSSP, what would be like, let's say, how would be the examination environment? How can you, like what type of resources would be useful? Because you're creating a base for CSSP here. And at the same time, you will gain a certified in cybersecurity entry-level certification. So ISC Square one is the recent one. It's a good one. And ISC Square in itself is a very certified institute, a top institute. So ISC Square, CompTIA Security Plus, and EC Council, Certified Ethical Hacker. These are the three ones which you can take as you start to prepare and get into the industry. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And then, so you said you have experience as an IAM engineer, and then you transition over into SIEM and threat hunting, correct?
Yeah.
So could you walk us through just a quick 60 seconds of what a day in the life of SIEM and threat hunter would look like?
So in case of SIEM, there are a lot of roles which come into picture because SIEMs fall into security operations. So under security operations team, you have an incident responder, you have a SOC analyst, and different levels of analysts, like analyst 1, analyst 2. Then you might have a malware analyst in the team, a threat intelligence analyst in the team. So there are different operations which a SOC team is doing using a SIEM. And let's pick up one of them. So as a SOC tier 1 analyst, you would be mostly working on some of the real-time alerts which are being generated in the SIEM. You would be working on to resolve those alerts. If some of those alerts are high-end alerts which are critical, you will be analyzing them and then passing on to the next level of analyst, which is the second level of analyst. So see, the SOC tier 1 analysts are the ones which are starting with the SOC team with the basic knowledge of SOC, and they start to understand the tool, the dashboard, the working of alerts, threat intelligence, like basic understanding of the tool and how to go about threat detection. Not proactive threat detection, but reactive threat detection in terms of alerts analysis and further performing alert triage. So that's what mostly a SOC analyst does. And they then further coordinate with different analysts in the team. As I said, for example, if something is critical, they resolve it at their end and then provide their notes and escalate to the second level of the senior SOC level. And then when the senior SOC level, these are the ones who are more involved into threat hunting.
Gotcha.
So if somebody is a threat hunter, they are more likely to be on the senior side of SOC because they are proactively involved, they are more experienced, and their role is more around looking for threats proactively in the environment.
Wonderful. Okay. And then I guess, with cybersecurity, I know so many people who really want to be great in the cybersecurity industry just have to pretty much accept that you have to be a lifelong learner, like just because there's always new threats, always new vulnerabilities. So what would you say are like your top 3 favorite resources for just staying up to date within the industry of cybersecurity?
So yes, that's absolutely true. Yeah, you have to be a lifelong learner. So cyber news, like you have to be like Cyber is one of the news article sites which I really follow. My channel also posts some of the cyber news because we keep eye on the weekly news. So one really has to keep an eye on I would not say every second, but every day or in every 2 days, keep an eye on major threats that are taking place. So there is Cybersecurity Magazine, there is Cyber. These are a couple of resources that usually provide you. There are other as well because now we have so many resources.
Yes.
Yeah, there are so many. So it's just one thing which should go in your mind is your routine would be as such. You would be working, but you would be putting out this extra amount of time, this additional supplemental hours to looking at what's happening in the threat landscape. And at the same time, what's new in the industry, what I'm doing. Because after spending few years in a particular domain, that's what my kind of like, that's what I like personally is I would like to move to another area and pursue that knowledge because it's vast, as I said. So you have to keep on upscaling yourself. And in terms of upscaling, you have to understand, okay, what's right on the top right now. So there is cloud security. Cloud is increasing. Most of the companies, we are actually moving in terms of Kubernetes, containers, etc. So there is a very gradual shift towards cloud. So cloud security would be something which is going to become prominent. Then proactive threat detection is going to become prominent, which is your threat hunting. This particular domain is going to become very, very important. It is, but it's continue to grow. And the third one is your machine learning, because as the threats are growing, the environments, like when I talked about SIEM, most of the SIEMs are now accompanied by machine learning models, where we can not only identify threats, like not only identify known threats, we can identify unknown threats, unknown patterns as well. We call it as the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures. So machine learning, use of machine learning. So there is a collaboration of data science and cybersecurity, of course. So these kinds of role, privacy engineer role, metaverse. People are talking about metaverse. We are talking about moving to Web3. So all of this, like as the humankind has moved literally from WWW to now here we are, definitely the privacy concerns are going to increase. So understanding privacy, difference between privacy and security, how privacy is going to take a very important turn when we are going to act more into, like, as companies support or as companies, they release more metaverse related products, privacy and concerns are going to become very, very important. So these are the top 4 or 5 things to watch out for, especially in the upcoming times. Yeah.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Aastha, for your time. Truly appreciate you just being here and taking the time to speak with me.